Well, hey everybody, it's Chris DeFirio, and welcome to another edition of Shift Break from Keys to the Shop, brought to you by our friends at La Marzocco. Those folks have been making espresso machines by hand in Florence since 1927, and they have been just a powerhouse, a standard of quality, innovation, beauty. The legacy of these machines. I know they have a program going on right now where they're inviting people to sort of post and show how many shots their La Marzoccos have pulled over the years. It's amazing that some of these machines have been in operation for so long. Millions of shots of espresso off of these La Marzoccos. And they have a well-earned reputation. And you need that kind of stability in your shop. And I want you to go to lamarzocousa.com. Check out what they have to offer. Things that are very technologically advanced, things that are a little bit more manual, size and scope and look. There is something that fits what you need. So for espresso equipment, for the best espresso machines, go to lamarzocousa.com. Reach out to their sales folks by emailing info@lamarzocousa.com. And I promise you, this machine is the best money can buy. Now, we're also sponsored by our friends at Rattleware, smallwares that really are meant to operate as a stable background, just there to help you do good work. They want stuff that just works. Functional smallwares. Who'd have thunk it? I mean, they've been in business for a long time, decades of serving the coffee industry. Love the folks there and what they produce. I've been using Rattleware products basically my entire career. I would recommend if you're in the business of coffee and you need smallwares, which that's you. Okay, we all need smallwares, pitchers and whisks and shot glasses and knock boxes and the like. Check out Rattleware's products. You can go to rattleware.com, or if you're shopping elsewhere, look for the Rattleware logo. And you're going to have that assurance that what you're getting has been made to just work. Now, today's episode, I wanted to talk about cupping. And listen, I'm getting into this thing where I like title things in a way that makes you go, what does he mean by that? Right? What do they call that? Clickbait? It's not really clickbait because I actually believe it. It is overrated within the sphere of certain places in the business. Now, if you're a coffee roaster and you want to really understand the differences in the various roasts of coffee that you produce, the batches of coffee, and you're cupping every batch of coffee should be cupped, tasted. You got your between batch protocol. You want a deep dive? We've got so many episodes of the Rate of Rise series talking about things like between batch protocol and quality control and all of those other fun things. So Rate of Rise series from Keys to the Shop, ROR, look for that. Have fun. Roasters, cupping is what you do. And if you're a green buyer, cupping is what you do. It's an assessment of the quality of the green coffee, an assessment of the consistency of the roasted coffee. And when we move it from there to the world of retail, without the caveat of this is a practice that is firmly rooted in this area of our industry of coffee, that turns into a stand-in or a replacement for quality control that actually should be different than cupping. Cupping is not going to tell you how that coffee really tastes in the air pot, out of an espresso machine, etc. And that's the kind of knowledge that you in the front of house, as a barista, as a manager, as a trainer, and owner, need to know. And often what I find is that people use cupping as a means to describe coffee to customers who are drinking it, not the way that it was cupped, not the way it was assessed. Now, there's a translation that happens. So the cupping table, we have notes about this coffee, this Honduran coffee that we get year after year. This is what we feel like it tastes like compared to last year. And then the mistake we make is we put those tasting notes from the cupping on the bag of coffee. Without tasting that coffee, in the format the customers are going to be tasting it, as a brewed coffee, as a shot of espresso, with a particular kind of water that we know most of our customers use to brew coffee at home, or the water we use to brew the coffee on our Fetcos and our buns and our Curtises and all that stuff. So if you're not doing that part in terms of quality control, where you're testing and tasting the coffee in order to translate to the customer the experience that they're going to have, then you're going to be telling them something that they're probably not, they're not going to resonate with it. Their palate already has a hard time sometimes picking up the things that we pick up, let alone trying to translate from a loud slurping, aerated slurp in the cupping bowl of a tepid cup of coffee, where we are looking ardently for notes, notes, and notes, and notes. They're just drinking a cup of coffee brewed completely differently out on the floor in their home, and they look at the bag and they say, I don't taste it. So that, I mean, this opens up a whole conversation around how, tasting notes can be deceptive, and most of the time they're deceptive because we produce tasting notes based on cupping and not based on real world brewing of the coffee. So first of all, here, I beg of you, do that. If you're trying to sell to the consumer, you're trying to translate what this coffee has to offer, speak the language of that coffee in the context that it's going to be enjoyed. The cupping, in my mind, is about quality control in consistency, and it has its own kind of a language that is supposed to tell you maybe that there's been a change in qualities of the coffee that you need to be aware of. So what I would recommend for quality control, and if you want your baristas to really get into the idea of tasting coffee, not wrong to have them cup coffee, but tasting the actual coffee from the urns, from the pour over recipe that is for that single origin you have on bar today, tasting the espresso. Everybody tastes the espresso. Taste always. Taste the shot as a group, as a team. Know what you're tasting and what you're trying to achieve with that coffee. Quality control doesn't make sense if there's not a standard that's set. For your espresso blend, for example, if you decided that you just want to open up that, I want the baristas to feel empowered to dial in the espresso to where they think it tastes good. Everybody's pH level, their chemical makeup, the way they perceive flavors, what they prefer, their mental state, emotional array is different. And so if you've got a team of 2 or 3 people, and it depends on who's on the bar, they're going to adjust it based on taste, based on their preferences, if you've given them license to do that, which means the customer doesn't get as a consistent a product in something that's supposed to have been blended for an ideal outcome in the espresso shot to taste like this as an espresso. Now, God forbid a roaster was, unthinking in the way that they described that espresso blend on the bag to the barista and used cupping notes to describe that espresso blend, which would be ridiculous, I know, but I have a feeling it happens more than we think. But if you've got an espresso blend, which you do, or origin that you use for espresso, you've got to know how it's supposed to taste as espresso. Supposed to is a decision. You can collectively come to that decision, but that there is a standard is what quality control is about, because we are controlling for the product of quality. We are controlling for that thing. Otherwise, it's just quality and no control. It doesn't matter. So on your menu, you should, whatever means you want to do this by, if it's just you and 2 other people, if it's you and the whole team, at some point we have to make a decision that the vanilla latte, the espresso, the drip coffee from this origin, the pour over, etc. These have goals. We have quality control for all of those things because we have an ideal outcome, and it can be within reasonable tolerances. So if it's a shot of espresso and you give somebody a directive to say it has to be exactly 28 seconds with an output of 38 grams, where you had 17 grams in, 38 grams out, and if it's not that, your misplaced zeal will cause that barista to waste a ton of coffee, dialing in. You can't get it exactly. There is a range of acceptable tolerances that you can give people. And over time, you're going to be able to hit that mark way super consistently, because your aim gets better when you've got a target. If you've got no target and you're just practicing shooting, you're practicing with your bow and arrow, and you're like, well, if I practice shooting randomly, then I suppose I'm going to get a bullseye someday. Well, yeah, maybe. But a broken clock is right twice a day, as they say. So you need a target. And I think it's your role to take your menu and have tasted the entire menu, know what the ideal taste of an Americano, a skim milk mocha, an espresso, a pour over, a drip cup of coffee, all of it. You should know what this tastes like. We've talked about quarterly training before, and for your staff, or refreshers where they make the menu, and that's a great way to keep quality control there. But for you, setting the parameters, you need to know how things are tasting on the bar. And we assume too much. We assume that things are tasting fine because we haven't heard anything bad. And when we do hear something bad, because we're checked out, it feels like coming from left field. Like, how dare they? Like, they don't know good coffee, and the reason we think that is because we're so distant from the reality of our bars. We're still in the back room cupping coffees. So I guess I don't mean for cupping to be this thing that I'm trotting out to make fun of, because I'm not making fun of it. It has its place. We love to do esoteric, tangential things in coffee as a means to address something that we could face head on. Put your palate into the reality of where your customers are and the things that your baristas are producing, and the outcomes of the machinery, the water, the practices, the workflows, and that is your cupping. That is you. When we cup coffee, you know what you do? You aerate the coffee so that it sprays and it coats the entire palate. And you're really focusing and assessing that. The sincerity, the level of seriousness that people have in this is almost sometimes the exact opposite of what you find when people approach their coffee shops and what's being produced on the coffee shops. So we'll get super specific, introspective, coat that whole palate. But what about what's happening in the coffee shop right now? Where's the quality control there? What's the equivalent of you tasting the experience, tasting the coffees? That's the aeration onto the palate, literally and figuratively. So that's my thing here is, for quality control, when it comes to coffee shops, cupping is super overrated, and I don't mind doing it. I love doing it. I love that you do it. It's not a replacement for the kind of things that we need to be doing to maintain and even improve the quality of what we're producing. That is in turn better for your business and better for coffee overall. So hope that this was helpful. And I hope that you have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget Keyholder coaching groups coming up. You've got 5 days left to apply to be a Keyholder coaching group member for the spring 2026 cohort. And you can find the link in the show notes to do just that. All right. Take care, and we'll see you next week on another edition of Shift Break, from keys to the shop.